Okay, hi everybody. Thank you guys for being here today. I'm really excited for this. I think it's gonna go well. It worked out really well. I mean, for that storm to hit us right before a webinar about energy was kind of perfect. So just to introduce myself, I'm Paige Hemmingson. I'm a junior here at Southwestern. I'm majoring in environmental studies, and this is my second year being a sustainability ambassador with the Office of Sustainability, working to promote campus involvement and education on environmental issues. So today we are joined by Shorty Schwartz, who is the Senior Manager of Facilities Operations here on campus, and Dr. Josh Long, Associate Professor of Environmental Studies and Chair of the Environmental Studies Program. Thank you guys both so much for being here today. I think we're going to have a really great discussion. I'm excited for this. I'm going to hand it over to my co-presenter, Nafisa.
Hi guys, my name is Nafisa. I am a sophomore at SU and I've been a sustainability ambassador for the past 2 years. I am a double major in business and economics and a minor in environmental studies, and I'm very excited to help host this awesome Power Hour Energy webinar. So to start off, I will start off with really great energy efficiency tips. What not better way to start our energy webinar? All right, so the first category of energy efficiency tips is obviously starts at home. Heating and cooling is something that we all need to do every day, no matter what weather it is. So one tip to maximize your energy efficiency is to set your thermostat to 78 degrees Fahrenheit in summer and 68 degrees Fahrenheit in winter. Having a programmable, or you can have a programmable thermostat, or you can manually set it to 78 or 68 depending on the weather. And it actually reduces your energy usage by 6% to 8%. So yeah, that might not seem like a lot, but if everybody did all this, think about how much energy we could save. Another thing that you could do is dress warm in winter and cool in summer. Dressing warm at home in the winter instead of using the heater saves 1,500 watts of energy. And dressing cool at home instead of using the air conditioner reduces carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by 33,160 pounds. Instead, there are other alternatives to using the air conditioner, which include using blinds or blackout curtains to keep your house cool during the warmer months, or just opening windows and doors. You save the exact same amount of carbon dioxide. Yeah, so that is a lot of carbon dioxide saved if you just use those three alternatives instead of just using the air conditioner. All right, and now moving on to our second category is laundry. All of us need to do laundry. Some people do it on a bi-weekly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, I don't know. One tip that you could do is use cold water for a washing machine. It saves 90% of the energy required to do a load of laundry. That is a lot of energy. You can also use washing and drying machines at night. It is a low demand laundry time, so because nobody wants to do their laundry at nighttime, or virtually nobody. And that reduces stress on the power grid, which is very helpful. And another thing that you could do is hang dry your clothes. It can save up to 1,800 to 5,000 watts of energy. All right, and now the third category is obviously lighting. So everybody has told you this at least one time in your life. You gotta turn off the lights when you leave an empty room. Saves 0.06 kilowatt hours per hour for a 60-watt bulb. Another thing that you could do is use an LED or CFL. They use 80% less energy than incandescent bulbs, and also they're just a lot brighter too, so why not use that? Another thing that you could do is work or study in shared spaces or in natural or outdoor light. Studying in those spaces or outdoors can save 432 kilowatt hours per year instead of using home lighting. So yeah, definitely if you're next time that you're studying for finals or for a test, or if you're working, why not go outside or to the library, And now my final category is electronics. I'm pretty sure everybody's told you this too. Unplug electronics and appliances, even when you're not using them, because they are vampire sources. You can unplug electronics and appliances when not in use, and that will save 40% of total electricity used by the device. Also, you should definitely avoid charging electronics overnight. I know that it's tempting, but gotta avoid that because it can save 6.5 kilowatt hours of electricity per year. On top of that, you could use a solar charger. Last semester, I actually released an energy assessment where the winner got a solar charger, and it's really helpful because you could save 3.68 watts of power if you use a solar charger instead of power from an outlet. And then the final thing that you could do, if you have the money, of course, is to get an Energy Star certified appliance. I found this really great statistic online, and it said, even if just 10% of homes in the US used Energy Star appliances, carbon emissions would be reduced by the equivalent of 1.7 million acres of trees. And yeah, that is a lot of carbon emissions. All right, that is all the tips that I have. I will hand it over to you.
Hello. Okay, so now we're going to change gears a bit, and we're going to be talking about the history of energy at Southwestern and Georgetown and in Texas. If you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so we're starting on a local scale. We're going to look at energy at Southwestern. So Shorty, this question is for you, but Dr. Long, you can always hop in if you have any input. So first question, how is energy managed at Southwestern?
Great question. Southwestern, am I still muted? No, okay. Southwestern uses a building automation system. We call it a BAS to control how the building's power is used. There are a total of, that building automation system, like I said, allows us to have set points that the university has decided upon in our residence halls. Y'all may be familiar with them. You see like a little slide. Sometimes there's a plus or minus, and typically we'll set a set point of maybe, like you said, 68 in the winter and maybe 72 in the summer, 73 in the summer. And then the students have a plus or minus range that they can slide. And typically it's plus or minus 3 degrees. It does, at the end of the day, it does help save the money and as far as how much chill water we have to use. Another note is there's a total of 2 meters that feeds the campus. And from those 2 meters, that's how we're billed from the city. Out in each building, we have 28 sub-meters that we can determine and see how much the buildings are using. Now, it's not the greatest system right now. Veronica has been working with us. We've been trying to install what I want to call real-time sub-meters that will feed back to our building automation system, and in turn will give us better visibility into what the buildings are using. Veronica and I have discussed numerous times of how can we create a challenge from the residence halls of this, we're going to save this much electricity this month. Well, I mean, if we can get these new sub-meters installed, that will go a long ways to achieving that goal. We are in the middle of discussing with a couple of vendors to get the best pricing, the best meters that will work with our building automation system. And on that drawing that you see right there, that slide, the campus is divided up pretty much as you see it. There's those 4 feeders that run from the west of Moses Snyder intramural fields. And the one we always have the most difficulty with, it seems like with the city, is the bluish, the blue one that runs through and by the Central Plant, McCombs Campus Center, and over to Prothrow. They always seem to gives us a little bit of a fit whenever the city does something and we lose a leg, and it just creates havoc across through the middle of campus. The outage we had Thursday before Valentine's from the ice storm, that primarily affected our lower apartments and some of the northern side of campus. I believe it was some down power lines, tree limbs fell on lines and stuff of that nature, but it's just one of those unfortunate situations. Everything hit just right. I think that does it for that.
Yeah. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. Kind of leads into it perfectly. So this graph is showing the breakdown of Southwestern's energy usage from the most available data. So it says 49% of energy usage is from electricity purchased through the city of Georgetown and its renewable energy credits, which we're going to talk about. later with the history of Georgetown, and 51% of it is from natural gas from Atmos Energy. So, Shorty, what is SU's energy breakdown, and where does the energy go? Like, what's using energy, what's using electricity versus using natural gas?
Okay. I'll do the natural gas one first. That's the easy one. All of our buildings, well, all of our shared buildings, such as the academic buildings, the residence halls, I believe that's it. Those two breakdowns use what we call building or boilers, hydronic boilers, and they're fed with natural gas. That in turn heats the water that runs through the building through the air handling units and the coils to, like I said, heat our buildings. That and the kitchen, McComb's kitchen uses quite a bit of natural gas as well for dining services. As far as electricity goes, everything else is electricity. We do, for all of our lights, the apartments, meaning McCombs, Lords, and DLC, they have what we call DX units, or regular air conditioning units like you might have anywhere else at your home. Those are the biggest users. That kind of gives the breakdown, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, in the future, those percentages are going to change, and there's going to be more things running on the renewable energy credits?
We haven't discussed much as far as how to reduce our carbon use or fossil fuels such as natural gas. We haven't really got into those discussions. In the meantime, I mean, it is still one of the most efficient ways of heating. Albeit just putting the emissions into the air. I will tell you this: the most recent boilers that we've been installing are what they call a low NOx, which is nitrogen oxides. So they're emitting much lower, or the emissions are much lower than they've ever been. And I believe, it's safe to say that that's always being improved upon. That's one thing that we require when we install new boilers across campus: more efficient burning, cleaner burning boilers with the lower emissions. As far as electricity goes, we've been discussing some pretty neat ideas. I'm gonna let Veronica share that one a little bit later. Give her a little, FaceTime there. But in the meanwhile, we are purchasing the renewable credits, like y'all all know, and that power does come from a group called American Electric Provider, and it's out of the South Trent Wind Farm in West Texas. But it is, it's safe to say that, we purchase renewable energy credits from wind generated providers, but, in the heat of the battle, during the ice storm and everything, those things were freezing up. The natural gas providers weren't able to do what they needed to do. So, I mean, there's a blend in there we always know about. So I guess that's what I got to say.
Cool, thank you. Okay, slide. All right, so another question: does SU have any on-site renewable energy, and are there future plans for expansion? Because I've heard that SU has a lot of potential for hosting a solar farm. How feasible would that be?
Well, I'll start by saying that John Orr was the one who started all this back in 2010 or so, with doing a little experiment in Heather Hall, or the Black Box Theater. And just for I don't know, nostalgia's sake, those solar panels right there are about 230 watts is all they can create. Veronica and I have been discussing with solar provider. Their new panels are putting out upwards of 480, or is it 500 watts per panel, something like that, quite a bit. But I'll let Veronica take it from here.
Sure, happy to. It is, a little bit of a pipe dream to have a massive solar farm, since we do have a large amount of land that is currently unutilized by Southwestern. However, when we were jumpstarting the conversations about having a solar farm, there was a little bit of a red flag from our electricity provider, aka the city of Georgetown, in that they have a cap on what residents and customers can have in regards to on-site generation of solar. So for residential, they only allow 10 kilowatt systems, and we were looking at possibly a 10 megawatt system. So a definite order of magnitude larger than what the city allows. However, we are optimistic that if we do start small and do a couple more rooftop solar projects, that they would be more forgiving and lenient, since we are a large purchaser of electricity for the city of Georgetown.
Awesome. Okay, so next question. This one is also for Shorty, but I think Veronica, you could probably also answer this. So what has Southwestern done to reduce its energy consumption?
We're installing LED lights wherever, whenever possible. Now, this goes back to being able to get good baseline and metering what our buildings are using, which, you know, you putting the chicken before the egg kind of thing. We're cart before the horse, whatever you want to say. We're trying to do all this at once. Several years ago, I think I did, or students did, a request to the Green Fund for Wazell Gym, of changing over from the 400 watt LED or 400 watt HIDs that were in there to a 226 watt LED fixture. So, I mean, immediate savings. It was less than 3-year payback, I believe. So that was kind of the impetus that started this train rolling. And then across campus, just within the last 18 months, as time escapes me so quickly here these days, but might have been within the last 2 years, y'all may have noticed the new LED street lights. That was a dream of mine for many, many, many years. And I got in front of the right people, and it just made sense. As it was Dr. Berger at the time, he said, well, it's a no-brainer, do it. So we spent the money, installed the lights, and Veronica and I have talked about this, you know, the savings that gives back to the university. It's kind of hard to say, let's take that money out of the utility budget and put it over here, because as soon as we save money here, we might be spending a little more money in this area, like say in the new science building. But the energy savings alone at the streetlight level was somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000 a year on paper. So I mean, you laugh at it, but you know, it may not mean much, but you add it up over the course of a year, 2, 3, so on and so on. So then there was that. And then with Veronica's help, you can see that great looking gym right there. That was all changed over to LED last December, and it's fully controllable. We can set different scenes for graduations, for matriculations, for Brown Symposium, you name it. And the best of all, there's no extra noise. I mean, it's really cool. If you've not been into the new gym to see, or the gym to see the new lighting, you need to. It's really cool. So those are some big ones right there. I know, like Olive Lord Apartments has had a little 10 watt, I think it's a 10 watt LED bright stick, we call them, installed in place of the 60 watt incandescents. So I mean, there's a realized savings there. So I mean, we're doing what we can when we can and as often as we can when it comes to replacing fluorescents, HIDs with LED lighting.
Cool.
And I just want to give a quick shout out that the Wazell project was an environmental studies capstone project led by Dr. Long. So a lot of this has originated from students, and then facilities has just more or less taken it over and amplified it across campus.
That's awesome. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So we are scaling back a bit now, and we're going to be looking at Georgetown. So Dr. Long, these questions are more oriented towards you, since you've done so much work in the community for the push towards renewables. So as the slide says, from 2012 to 2018, under the former mayor Dale Ross, Georgetown made a huge transition from non-renewable to green electricity through long-term solar and wind contracts with West Texas. So Dr. Long, you were pretty instrumental in the change. So what did that look like? Well, you are. What did that look like from an insider's perspective? Was there like a lot of pushback? How easy was that?
Well, I'll say this, I often get a lot of credit for this when most of these things that were happening and being implemented were right when I got here. And so I always have to tell the story about what happened before I got here. And that was, that had a lot to do with SEEK, the Student Environmental Organization on campus, and their work with Dr. Laura Hopgood. And so that, again, that predates me, really pushing hard for trying to convince Southwestern, both for environmental and for economic reasons, to convert to renewable energy. And there was some interesting coordination with City of Georgetown as well, because City of Georgetown was looking to diversify their energy profile, energy sources. And they really didn't have a major customer that they could experiment with. And they wanted to work in the energy market. And this was about the time that renewable energy was becoming incredibly competitive. This was 2008, 9, 10. And during that time, they used Southwestern sort of as a guinea pig. And it was very successful in the fact that the prices were steady, they were inexpensive, and they were very predictable. When you lock into a renewable energy contract, you don't fluctuate with fossil fuel prices. Now, at some point, we will get to 2018, 2019, where we've had major shifts in sort of the market pricing in the grid. And that's actually forced Georgetown to lose some money and over purchase. And your slide here actually shows sort of how that ended up happening, the inability to sell back to the market. But in terms of overall work on campus, I'm actually not trying to like defer. The truth is, students are usually leading the way. And so people like in the environmental studies program and the sustainability committee, again, I gotta give a lot of credit to Laura Hobgood and SEEK students. They're always pushing to make Southwestern a little bit better and find a new way, find a little bit more environmentally and socially conscious. And so our job as instructors is trying to facilitate that. And Shorty's played a big role in this too. I mean, even his predecessor at physical plant, Bob Mathis, Bob actually coordinated with Laura and the students and the president and the chief financial officer to kind of find a way for this to work at Southwestern. And so from Bob and then transitioning into Shorty and right up until today, it's always a team effort on campus, who can coordinate with whom and how we can accomplish those goals. And it's an ongoing project. I mean, we keep referring back to Veronica because Veronica, since she's shown up last year, has had some really great ideas. And some of them will be, I think, slower to implement. Some of them are very quick to implement. And so it's just it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, for sure. So since you have seen that process, I'm asking you to predict the future, but do you know what the future of energy could look like in Georgetown? Like, do you see any pushes in the student body towards anything?
Yeah, the student activism on, this is not so much the case for conservation, which we continue to push on. But in terms of where we get our electricity sourced, that could be renewed. It's died down a bit because we're kind of in a little bit of a limbo period right now. When the city of Georgetown went 100% renewable electricity, they did so in a long-term contract. And I think this will come up in our conversation about the grid later. They purchased a certain amount of energy expecting growth. Well, they were also pushing conservation, and they were also sort of betting on the price of natural gas and coal and oil and nuclear in the state. Well, what happened was the price of natural gas just went through the basement in 2011, 2012, and it kept going down. Well, actually, it was actually later than that. And when that price went down so low and we had contracted to buy so much of that energy, we couldn't sell it back to the grid at a competitive market rate. And so Georgetown utility system was sort of sitting on all this excess energy and sort of took a hit. Since that happened, and we're talking about just in the last couple of years, there's been a little bit less transparency about our electrical decisions. The city council felt a little bit burned by some citizens, very vocal citizens of Georgetown, who were like, oh, our electric prices are going up and we should have never gone to renewable energy. The truth is they didn't go up very much at all. I think the average person's paying about $12 or $13 more a month to maintain renewable electricity. And City of Georgetown has had to renegotiate those contracts. So while we still have a very significant amount of renewable electricity, we've now added natural gas to the mix. And there's pros and cons to that. From a climate standpoint, not super great. From a reliability standpoint, it really depends on where we are in our development with renewable energy. So if you're asking a long-term future, we're just going to continue to, I think, grow our renewable energy as a share of our energy portfolio, eventually in the city, but of course, I think throughout the state. And I'm not sure how many questions I'm going to be answering later about this, but I'll just say right now, one of the issues is trying to make sure that we have a consistent base load in our electrical grid. And we are already finding ways to allow renewable sources to do that. When we talk about base load and the kind of electricity that's always reliable on the grid, people tend to talk about coal and nuclear and natural gas. But we are making incredible advancements in battery storage. And the way that we can store that electricity coming in with new research and development, we are not a very long ways away from having the kind of storage capacity where renewables can serve as reliable baseload. So you look 10 years down the road, and I think we're just going to see more and more renewable energy, not just in Texas, where we're already a leader, but hopefully everywhere in the world.
Yeah, that was a perfect segue into our next slide. We're talking about Texas energy. So following the snowstorms at the end of last month, the topic of Texas energy became, I don't want to say a laughingstock because that sounds mean, but it was a debacle. So if you didn't know before the storm, you definitely found out afterwards, but Texas has its own independent power grid that is separate from the rest of North America, and it is operated by ERCOT, another name that is easily recognizable since it's been all over the news. So just to get some background, Dr. Long, where does Texas energy come from?
Oh boy. Yeah, okay, I'm gonna have to watch my time here because it's a long and complicated story, but it's also a really interesting story. And there's a lot of cultural and political factors that go into it. I mean, we've been sort of on our own grid all along. We were building power plants in the state of Texas in the early 1900s, and all the way up through the 1930s when we started developing hydroelectric plants and electrifying the hill country through LCRA. And all kinds of other major projects throughout the state of Texas. Well, it was about that same time that we started to nationalize the grid. And I think it was under FDR's second term that he attempted to nationalize the entire grid. And so every time electricity crossed state lines, it was going to fall under federal regulation. Well, Texas was like, well, nobody produces more energy than we do. And we have an awful big state. We could actually produce all of the energy we need and manage it within the state and avoid federal regulation. So that sort of Texas cultural value of independence and trying to stay clear of federal regulation has its pros and cons. We've certainly seen some of the cons come out of this. But over the years, we've diversified that. I mean, we used to be heavily dependent on coal and oil. Nuclear became an important part of this. And actually, nuclear is going to remain an important part of this. And there's pros and cons to that as well. But where we've really grown has been wind energy. And this is one of the things that's sort of counterintuitive to, I think, what a lot of people think are cultural values in Texas. We always think, we're a big oil state. Well, back in the late 1990s and early 2000s, we decided to become just a big energy state. We knew we had incredible wind potential. And that's where a lot of the technological advancements we're making in efficiency and production were in wind. So we went all in on wind, and we invested quite a bit in transmission lines that would carry a lot of that electricity from West Texas, where there doesn't have a huge population, to other parts of the state. There's a whole nother story that's going to be coming out about solar, because we've never really tapped our solar potential, and we have more solar potential than any other state in the United States. And so we're starting to see huge growth in solar. Right now, you don't have solar up there in the percentage because it's less than 2%, but that's changing. We've got still the sort of installed capacity we're going to have from solar might double and triple just in the next few years, and then get up to as high where we're talking about significant percentages of our base load. Now, there's, you say, where does the energy come from? Where does the electricity come from? It is all produced in the state of Texas. Nobody produces more energy than we do, not even close. And so we have continued to manage that. Now, I'll come back to this probably in a second too, but when it works with our market system with ERCOT, on an average day, it's incredibly efficient. Our grid manages real-time production and consumption of energy down to the millisecond just right down the road at their headquarters in Taylor, Texas. And they do a fantastic job to bring Texas some of the cheapest electric prices in the United States. However, when it's not working, and when we have not prepared for certain instances, and when, again, I think we'll get around to the blaming part of this webinar here in a minute, there is a massive failure. And without, this sort of, the kind of stepping in and regulating that system and preparing for the kind of situations like we had the last couple of weeks, it's a disaster.
Yeah, that segues pretty well into our next section, which is going to be about energy misconceptions. So during the snowstorm, there was a ton of misinformation floating around the internet, and I thought it'd be interesting to have our experts with us settle some of these ones, and for all, so you can both, well, everybody here, I guess, could chime in on this. So during the snowstorm, I just said that. There's this is sort of an overarching question that everyone wants to know, since like millions of people were without power. Why did Texas electric infrastructure fail so terribly during the February snowstorms?
I could talk about this for a very, very long time. Shorty, do you want to jump in and say anything before I just go on for 20 minutes on this?
I'll spare you, let you get your breath. I did a little bit of research asking, y'all asking these questions, and when this was going on, I was snowed in and stuck at my house. I was right in the middle of trying to figure out what was going on. I found some interesting articles out there, and as much as anything, I was told the main culprit for the power outages were due to natural gas operations, or failure in natural gas operations and supply chains due to the extreme temperatures. When's the last time any of us have ever seen temperatures that cold? I mean, 5 degrees, 1 degree Tuesday morning. But that's what they're saying. I mean, from the frozen natural gas wells to frozen wind turbines, all the power sources were facing difficulties that no one was prepared for, except El Paso. And if y'all have read anything or learned anything about that, El Paso got out in 2011 or somewhere in that time frame. They chose to winterize and be prepared for the next big one. Because in 2011, we more or less went through the same thing. But El Paso did it the right way, and they heeded the warnings, and they winterized their natural gas productions and whatever else it entailed. And by all accounts, our natural gas generators, power generators, did not. And it's led to a huge fallout with ERCOT and the board and the PUC, commissioners. It's just, but that's what I have to offer on that. I don't know if Josh, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, you've covered most of it already, but there's even more. There's plenty of blame to go around with this issue, and that's why it's so complicated, but also pretty fascinating. So when you have a system like the ERCOT grid, where it's so heavily deregulated, and the only real major regulations are the market itself, right? The whole ideology behind this is that, in theory, market incentives would force all of the energy providers, whether it's natural gas, coal, wind, whatever, to always be prepared and go online and produce electricity so that they could make money when the price fluctuates. Especially when those prices go high, they can turn on their power plant, start generating electricity, and jump in and start making the money. Thing is, back in 2011, and really there was a report going all the way back to 1989 that said we were poorly prepared for these kind of winter storms. The Texas grid is prepared for those, middle of August, 4 o'clock in the afternoon surges in electrical use in the hotter times, right? But for electrical use to go up at night in the middle of winter and with winterized conditions, we were completely unprepared for. There was a report about that in 1989. There was a report about that in 2011, and a lot was said about it. The idea was, well, if electrical providers, power generators, want to do the right thing, they will winterize. But the fact is, there was no regulatory enforcement mechanism. ERCOT cannot make them do it. The PUC cannot make them do it. The state legislature could, but the state legislature did not, legislate to force these plants to winterize. The state legislature did not even put funds up to say, Here's some money that you could use to winterize these plants and prepare for the next storms. And so you had a lot of generators who were like, why would we invest all this money for a storm that'll happen every, 8, 9, 10 years in their mindset? And so that's when the market incentive kind of really falls, and where you really kind of do need some kind of government program to intervene. That's just in the producers. And Shorty's right, because we have, I think it's, 55 or 56, we have a huge percentage of our load that's natural gas. More natural gas failed than anything else. But so did some of the coal providers. We had frozen coal heaps that we couldn't get into to literally put the coal in. We had a nuclear tower, one of the generators down in the South Texas nuclear plant, that went offline for a while. And you've heard about some of the wind turbines that froze. All of those things are preventable. Every single one of them was preventable. And it's not just the generators. Then we had problems with transmission lines. We had problems with substations. And every time you have an ice storm and you have trees falling, breaking lines, you've got problems on the local level as well. And so it was sort of a, no pun intended, but a perfect storm that happened. And then of course everybody's blaming ERCOT, and there's plenty of blame to be made on ERCOT. ERCOT not only made some questionable decisions about who they were rolling on and off during those blackouts, including a report that came out just recently from Dallas Morning News saying that they were taking power plants offline, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So they were doing these managed blackouts, including actually taking some power plants offline. And there's some even more controversy after that, where they maintain these extremely high market prices well after we were exceeding demand. So again, lots of places to blame, and it's always a more complicated story than what you hear about in the news, right? Do y'all have any questions about pricing or anything? Because maybe I'll just say this real quick. When the market's functioning properly, we're paying, in parts of Texas, $25, $30 a megawatt hour. That's cheap. That's extremely cheap prices. And actually the week before, that's what we were paying. It was great, and we didn't have a huge demand. We had temperature in the 70s, right? And then when we started to see those peak demands happening, the price went up to $9,000 where it was supposed to be capped, to $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 a megawatt hour. So again, if we're going from $25 to $35 a megawatt hour to $9,000 or more a megawatt hour, I mean, that's what is that, 10,000% increase? That's just insane. And so the kind of cost that's being pushed on to the local providers, and in some cases consumers who were locked into a wholesale price that would fluctuate, is exorbitant. I mean, there's stories about people who worked with Griddy who were locked into that wholesale price, so they got whatever the wholesale price was, and they're getting $11,000, $12,000 energy bills. And so there's a big fallout from that. We're still not sure how that's going to play out.
Yeah, I had heard about that, and I was wondering, is that legal? Because doesn't that just seem like price gouging?
It's all in the fine print. Some people have said, like, well, maybe it's these customers' fault. They signed on to that contract. But in reality, most of these people were sold on the fact that they were on a wholesale price, and they were shared an average wholesale price, told it would fluctuate between a little bit down here and a little bit down here, maybe $9 at the cheapest, maybe $100 at the most expensive. Nobody who was being sold these plans was told that it was going to get up to $9,000 a megawatt hour. And when you're signing up for something, whether it's your iPhone or your iTunes, or your cell phone contract, whatever it is, do you read all of that fine print and sign on? No, you're listening to the person. You say, like, well, what's the price going to be? What can I expect? And you sort of take their word for it, which is why there is now legal action being taken against companies like Griddy and trying to step in and protect consumers.
Yeah, pretty cool. We can head on to the next question then. This is another controversial one. So this is something I've been seeing debated on Twitter and Facebook and by our governor. So is green energy truly to blame for the failures during the snowstorm?
I mean, the short answer is everybody's got a little bit of blame, but the majority of blame is definitely not on green energy. There were times when wind and solar were actually far out performing, where they were performing their full capacity. Now, during those days when turbines froze and were not performing as well, we lost about half of that capacity. But half of about 23, 24% is nothing compared to the amount of natural gas that we're going online. Or going offline, excuse me. And the solar, it doesn't contribute a lot. We only got about 2%-ish solar. But on the days when it wasn't covered with snow, I mean, you just knocked the snow off. And then, after the big storm, solar was, at some point, maybe somebody will ask and I'll share some graphs. Solar was just performing better than it ever has because we had these intense sunny days afterwards. And then solar actually contributed quite a bit of electricity to the grid afterwards. So no, renewable energy is definitely not to blame. Again, lots of blame to go around.
Yeah, definitely. I felt like that one was probably going to have a pretty short answer. Okay, we can go on to the next one then. Well, we pretty much already answered this one. So just for the sake of time, Nafisa, if we want to go past this one to the last question. All right, so this is the last one, and then we're going to open it up to a Q&A from the audience. But was the snowstorm truly a once-in-a-lifetime event? Because I'm 20, I've been alive for 20 years, and I feel like I've lived through like 10 once-in-a-lifetime events. So like, is it really once-in-a-lifetime?
I mean, I can tell you what all climate scientists are saying and what the data shows, and that is that, sure, have we had storms like this before? Yeah. Are they happening with this intensity and this frequency this often? Absolutely not. There's a very strong upward trend. Anybody who has any kind of background in statistics can look at the number and frequency of storms that we're having throughout the world, and it's not just Texas. So are we going to continue to have storms like this with a warming Arctic and a weakening jet stream, and with that jet stream dipping down and fluctuating more and more? We're going to start to see a very unpredictable climate pattern. And I think that's why a lot of climate scientists and people like me who work in climate policy don't like the term global warming. Yes, the Earth is warming. It is, absolutely. But that warming is changing all our climatic systems, whether they be ocean currents or wind currents, and all kinds of major oscillation events like the ENSO, like El Nino, you hear about that. It has effects on the jet stream. It has effects on the Gulf Stream. And these things we know will cause a heavy lack of predictability in weather, which is really, really problematic in so many areas of our lives, whether it's everything from agriculture to infrastructure problems, and I could really go on about this, but we've lived in a very comfortable period in history where we've been able to more or less predict the weather on a pretty average seasonal basis, and that's ending.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you. That was the last of our questions. So thank you guys so much for answering those. It was really insightful. So I'll hand it back over to Nafisa now.
Yeah, so to close off, we have a short Q&A session. So if you have any questions for us, please ask them in the chat.
While we're waiting for people to not be shy and ask questions, I have one. This is more of an optimistic thinking. Do you think that as a result of this terrible winter storm that we all just endured, do you think Texas is actually going to start winterizing its equipment, knowing that, this is caused by a not once in a lifetime event, that this will likely happen within the next 5 years again? Are people going to take it seriously and winterize? If not, where should we move to?
I'll answer part of this, and I'll let Shorty answer part of this as well, because we tend to have short memories when it comes to things like this, and I don't think that power generators and providers are going to do anything unless they're forced or incentivized to do it. And in the past, the state of Texas has often incentivized these things. And so if they provide funds for winterization, sure, that might happen. And then there may be local municipalities that take a more forward-leaning approach towards those sorts of things. But that only helps things if it's a local municipality. There are local provisions in transmission. And then, of course, I think Shorty's seeing all the problems on campus. I'm sure they're having these discussions right now about what can you do? Maybe we can't generate more electricity, but we can sure maybe try to work on our efficiency and distribution and reliability.
I mean, as far as will they, I don't know. What the university is taking a stance now. What do we need to do to better prepare ourselves? There's so many questions that still need answering. I know my boss, Rick Martinez, AVP of Facilities, asked all of us for what did we learn from this, lessons learned. And I suspect we'll have a sit down sooner than later to discuss what is and isn't possible, attainable. How can we just be more prepared for this? And what Josh was saying about, the providers, no one's going to just go out and spend a dime if they don't get a dime or two back. I mean, it's just what's in it for them. That's not how those companies view things. Y'all know that. We can only hope that, we talk to our legislators and have them, plead with them to pass legislation to enact certain, I don't know, I guess you'd say laws, and to incentivize it somehow, Josh. I mean, at the end of the day, it is about the dollar.
Yeah, and this actually, the question's coming up, a related question in the Q&A from Maria. This is the kind of thing that I get real frustrated with all the time. I look at climate policy and what we can do, and there's not a lot of great answers that look like very achievable in the near range. So what we should do is pass policies to invest more in renewable energy production, and we're doing a little bit of that. We certainly did that quite a bit in 2009. And that's actually led to huge research and development advancements because we put literally billions of dollars out there into renewable energy. And there is, of course, plans like the Green New Deal that come across as politically controversial, but the amount of money that could be invested into renewable energy technology would completely change the electricity production landscape and allow the kind of advancements that we've seen in the past, because increased efficiency, better storage, we need more transmission lines, and that costs money. And really, there's no, in a very practical sense, we should be doing these things no matter what, but politics does get in the way. And then issues like climate change, it's something that's happening. It is something that there's sound science on it, and yet it gets heavily politicized. And so with the politicization of these things and the cost, we have to just keep in mind, to answer Maria's question, we have to continue to push for policies to be made. Can individuals do something? Nafisa, that's great that you shared all that stuff at the beginning. I really appreciate you doing that, because it's very important that individuals act. But our individual actions, not to downplay that, but our individual actions pale in comparison to what some good policy measures can do on the national level. And finding that balance between saving the planet and ensuring a more reliable system versus what a lot of Americans worry about, and that is infringement on freedoms, is what is going to really dominate a lot of discussions about energy in the next decade. And Leah, global weirding, not global warming. I love that. Yeah, is that a Catherine Hayhoe quote? I think it is. And this will hopefully answer Maria too. Catherine Hayhoe is a very well-known speaker out of Texas Tech. There's a lot of resources out there, really good speakers and really good. It depends on what aspect you want to look at, whether it's policy measures, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's Green New Deal stuff. Kate Arnoff has a good book out right now. Daniel Eldona Cohen, who I actually know really well, we've collaborated on publications. He has a book out, and maybe I can, if you email me, Maria, I can give you some of these resources. But it's hard because some of them, they take a no-nonsense approach, and it's hard not to have them get politicized very, very quickly, even if it is a no-nonsense approach, even if it's based in science. That's why I get frustrated. I see the spin put on things so quickly.
I have another question, semi related to energy, but not related to resources. There are several countries that are optimizing microgrids and getting off the grid in general. Do you think that's something feasible for Texas, or are we just bound to have any on-site renewable energy go back to the grid? Or do you think we can get to a place where individuals or businesses themselves can generate their own industry without having to rely on the state or the national grid?
Well, if you want to go completely off grid in the state of Texas, you can do it. If you want to create your own independent system, nobody's going to stop you from doing that. As long as you are hooked into that grid, there are policies and procedures that require you to sort of distribute it back into the grid and create feed energy back or electricity back. And there's all these discussions about microgrids, and could a municipality like Georgetown actually, through managing multiple different individual solar panel or windmills or things like that, create its own little microgrid? I don't think I have a really good answer. I think I would have to speculate an awful lot, but on that. But there's nothing keeping you from going completely off grid. And all you really need is some solar panels and a backup generator, and you're usually pretty
Battery storage.
Battery storage, right? Yeah.
One other thing I was going to say, this is something I recently, I've learned it a long time ago, forgot it, and was reminded about it. Yes, we each can have our own solar arrays at our, houses, homes. But if you're tied into the grid, if I'm not mistaken, Veronica's shaking her head, by certain rules that govern tying back into the grid, you're not necessarily allowed to use that power because you've already committed giving it back to the grid by service agreements, I guess, for lack of better terms. So unless you, like you're saying, Josh, decide to go completely off grid, build your own solar array, keep it generator, or have battery storage, what is the next best thing? What is the next best thing? And speaking to others after this past event, I know some are looking at having basically just manual transfer switches, much like you would for automatic transfer with the generator, but using manual transfer switches at your residence, and have the ability to bring in a generator. Don't necessarily have a standby generator because you don't need to have it kick on the instantaneous, but have the ability to tie in a gas powered, diesel powered, propane, natural gas, whatever generator to keep your place afloat, keep it running, keep it heated. So I suspect the cost, there's been a rise in generator purchases and things of that nature, because people are heeding some warnings, and those that believe that this is going to happen more often, they're going to jump out there in the forefront of it. And I wouldn't call them doomsdayers, but they're just preparers.
It is a good time to be selling generators in the state of Texas. That is, you definitely want to be in that business. And the issue with that is there's some great generator technologies out there, actually. There's really awesome generators we can use. The problem is who has access to those and who doesn't, because they're pricey if you want a good one, and if you want something that's efficient. And something that really concerns me is the divide, the sort of energy and reliability divide we see in our communities between who has access to those and who doesn't. And I got to admit, it's tempting to me. Like if I was, building a house right now, I'd want a generator, but I probably have the financial means to do so, and not everybody does. So it's concerning about the kind of access to energy and the divide we have all over the country, but it's really pretty stark in the state of Texas.
We have time for maybe one more question. Otherwise, Paige and Fisa can wrap it up.
I just clicked on the participants thing and I noticed that Bill O'Brien is on here, and I just got to give a shout out to Bill O'Brien. He was on the top of the science building playing around with solar panels 15, 20 years ago, and always trying to encourage environmental studies students and physics students to learn more about solar energy. So shout out to Bill and all the interest that he was able to generate on campus.
And it does look like a question popped in, which is, do you expect there will be a lowering of cost of green technology in the near future?
So this is another speculating question. So right now, wind is absolutely competitive with coal. And we got to that point through research and development and public tax credits that came in the form of subsidies. Now, that's in itself a little tricky because up until about 2008, 2009, the subsidies were heavily in favor of fossil fuels. And we've started subsidizing renewable electricity a little bit more to get renewables to the point where they can now be competitive. Well, now solar and wind are competitive with coal. And really can't, and with oil burning as well. Not so much natural gas. Natural gas is just so cheap, but will it become competitive? It's going to depend on the market. I mean, we're pumping out so much natural gas right now that the price is just ridiculously cheap, and we're the #1 producer of natural gas in the world when we definitely don't have the largest reserves at all. But we are definitely cranking it out. So some of that is market-based. Some of that is technology and research-based, because with every new technological development we're making, solar is getting more efficient, wind is getting more efficient, especially solar. The real advancements are in solar. That's what's really come a long way in the last few years. Storage is making things more practical, and so that's going to affect pricing. So the easy way to answer is yes, I think green energy will become cheaper, sure. But how we do it, whether it's with some subsidies, whether it's with public tax credit, whether it's investment in research and development, which can be government programs, the Department of Energy or the EPA. It's how that'll be an open question, and then of course how the market prices are with natural gas largely.
Do you want to chime in real quick related to a previous point in the presentation, which was the energy breakdown at Southwestern, because about 50% is electricity and 50% is natural gas. I did the calculation on what it would be if we transitioned completely to electric, and it is just not affordable right now based off of the costs that we pay for electricity versus the costs we pay for natural gas. So when you do the conversion, it is dirt cheap to have natural gas. So if we wanted to get to the point where we had 100% electricity, we would need more subsidies to get electricity to be the same price point as natural gas, or hope that natural gas runs out and the price goes up.
Yeah, and do keep in mind, subsidies go both ways. Oil and gas in the state of Texas enjoys a lot of subsidies and political support. So some of that is how much we're producing. It's simple supply and demand, but it also, a lot of that has to do with how much of the exploration, drilling, transport, all that is heavily subsidized as well. So whether we like it or not, all forms of our energy have a political component to it.
Nafisa or Paige, you want to close us out?
Yeah, we ended right on time. So yeah, thank you all for joining us. We hope that it was very informative. Thank you, Dr. Long and Shorty and Veronica for joining us also. And yeah, we will see you next time.
Hey, thank you all very much. This was fun.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.